Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, SHANNON. Today I'll be doing the books that I read for the month of March, so let's just get right into it. So for the month of March, I managed to read 28 books. It's definitely not as high as I did for February, where I read 33 books, because that was honestly such an anomaly. I don't expect it to ever happen again for me to read 30 plus books. But I'm definitely going back down towards my regular, which is about 15 to 20. I mean, 28 is still pretty high for me, but definitely better, I guess, in terms of my ridiculous month of February. But for this video, I'll be sharing 6 of the books that I read. Most of them were really good. I actually had a really good, decent month this time around in terms of reading. A lot of 4, a lot of 5-star books. One of them in particular, I rated 2 stars, and I'll be sharing that book with you today. And yeah, the first book that I want to discuss is SKYWARD by Sanderson. I literally just finished this book this past weekend. I actually did a reading vlog on it, so I would link that above in case you want to check that out. This book is set in space in a faraway planet, and it follows a girl called Spencer who's trying her best to get into flight school. Unfortunately for her though, her father used to be a renowned pilot, but then due to some circumstance, he is now deemed as a coward. And because she's known as this coward's daughter, her chance of getting into flight school is pretty much slim to none. But of course, things happen, because if things didn't happen, there wouldn't be a book here, and she somehow gets into flight school. And there she learns more about the Crows, which is this ancient alien enemy of theirs, as well as the truth of what really happened to her father all those years ago. So this was definitely my favorite book. I mean, this is literally the best book that I've ever read. I mean, hands down. Okay, maybe not that far, but it's definitely one of the top books I've ever read. Ever. Like ever. It was also my first Sanderson book, so really hyped about that, because now I can totally see why everyone is loving his books, because now I'm just like, I need to read the rest of his books, honestly, like ASAP. Yeah. So obviously I give this book 5 stars. I honestly love all the characters so much. There's one in particular that is my favorite, and I'm not going to say because I don't want to spoil anything, but for those who have read this book, you definitely know which character I'm referring to. I also love the dynamics between Spencer and her fellow cadets, her best friend, as well as her instructor. But the best part, I think, was how much Spencer changed throughout this book. To be honest though, I do kind of see why she's a little bit juvenile in the beginning of the book, and a lot of other reviews have talked about how juvenile she is, and in some ways I do agree, but I think it's also because the thing is, she is clearly deemed as a coward's daughter. She has a stigma held against her. And so she overcompensates by being overly aggressive and whatnot. And so she will say all these things that are literally the most intense language ever. So for example, one of the lines that she would say is, "I will hold your tarnished and melted pin up as my trophy, as your smoldering ship marks your pyre, and the final resting place of your crushed and broken corpse." And this is after she somehow talked down this guy, and it was just, everyone just stared at her after she said that. I mean, this is not the only time she has said that. She has so many of these lines throughout the first half of this book. It's just freaking hilarious and honestly kind of aggressive, especially when you're on the receiving end. But then as the book continues and she developed all these friendships with her fellow cadets, she matured so much. And that character development, that maturity, that growth was just so wonderfully done. And just the fact of having friends who were able to understand her, who were able to accept her, made her change so much, and that character growth is just phenomenal. And in terms of the mystery element, the plot was just so well done. I was not expecting that ending at all, but then when it finally appeared and when it revealed itself, I was like, oh my god, it explains so much in this book, and I was just surprised. I read this for a book club and we were all shocked by this ending. So obviously I cannot wait for the sequel. I think it comes out in December. At least last I checked, it said December, so not too long, about half a year or so hopefully I can get my hands on a copy as soon as possible. Then the next book that I want to share is You Asked for Perfect by SILVERMAN. I read this as an ebook during Witchathon, I believe, and I will link that reading vlog above in case you want to check that out. So this book follows a boy called Arya, who's essentially your perfect college applicant, except for the fact that he hates calculus and he sucks at it. And then enters Amir, who's a family friend, but for whatever reason the two of them have never gone along, but he's great at calculus. Ariel reluctantly gets a tutor, aka Amir, and as the book continues, while he finds out that he really does not like calculus, but he's starting to really like Amir. So this is a cute, diverse YA contemporary novel. I gave it 4 stars, and it was honestly one of the most adorable books that I've read in a while. My favorite part though was how culturally diverse this book was, because not only did the author make all the characters culturally and ethnically diverse, but she also expanded it to include their religion, their food, etc. I also really enjoyed reading about Ariel and how much he changed from the beginning to the end of the book. In the beginning, he was very hung up on school, grades, and he's always unintentionally letting the people around him down. But as the book continued, he realized that there's more to life than school and grades. So if you're looking for a super cute, adorable YA contemporary novel that not only has great culturally and ethnically diverse characters, but also great representation with the LGBT community, as well as mental illness, then I definitely recommend this book. The next book that I want to share is The Gilded Wolves by ROSHANI CHOKSHI. This is a book about a heist that is set in the 1800s in Paris. There's also a very complex magic system involving some treasures, and I will honestly best describe this book as a mix of Six of Crows because of the heist element, Da Vinci Code because of the treasure hunting, puzzle, mystery kind of element, with a dash of magic. I don't want to say too much in terms of the summary because I think this book is kind of complicated, and it's best if you go in kind of open-minded without knowing any details, I think. But for this book, I gave it 4 stars. I would definitely say that the first half of this book was just so confusing. The world building was just so complicated, and the magic system was just so complex that it was honestly really hard to understand. And it pretty much took me the first half of the book to finally grasp what the heck is going on in terms of the magic system. And the book was also weirdly paced, like fast paced, probably due to all the heists happening left and right there, so I was constantly at the edge of my seats. And it was to the point that I felt so lost that I even contemplated DNFing this book, and I actually tried to read this book for the Books with Friend book club, and when I saw that they all hate this book, I was like, oh my god, I don't know what to do. And then I kind of went on social media like Instagram and Twitter, and everyone told me to, or everyone who had read the book and really enjoyed it, told me to wait until the second half and just power through because that's when things got better. And I am happy to say that the second half was fabulous. I loved that second half. Like, it was definitely like it more than made up for the fact that the first half was just so subpar. I absolutely love the characters. I mean, I love the characters since the beginning, to be honest, but because the first half of the book was just so complicated, I couldn't really devote my attention to the characters. But once the second half started to come together, I was able to finally appreciate how much I love the characters, and they're just all so endearing. And the ultimate build up to the heist at the end, as well as the ending of the story, was just so well done. And this book, I think, is just such a great build up to the sequel because I am literally dying in anticipation of what's going to happen next. With so much tension, so much of a cliffhanger that happened at the end of the first book that I just need to know what happens next, guys. So that is why I gave this book 4 stars, because I mean, like I said in the beginning, I was very contemplating about DNFing this book. I mean, I was going to be like 1 or 2 stars, but then the second half I was like, oh, thank god I stuck through with this book, because I think if you give up this book halfway through, like you're confused like I was, you're obviously going to come out this book really dejected and everything. But if you give this book a try and you actually continue with it, I think you might actually really like it, especially if you like puzzle solving, mysteries, fast paced, like heist kind of stories. Then I think this would be really good. There's also a lot of references of other cultures, specifically Egyptian culture, and I found that really fascinating. So if you like that as well, then that's definitely a bonus for you. Then the next book that I want to discuss is this lovely massive book, and that is Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is an epic fantasy novel that follows 4 characters. The world is also divided between the East and the West in terms of their different religious beliefs, including their stance on dragons in general. And in the background, there is this impending war against this ancient enemy that's coming into play. And honestly, that's all I want to say in terms of what this book is about, because it's definitely a book where you should go in with it not knowing too much. So I gave this book 4 stars, and I actually don't want to spend too much time talking about this book because I actually did a full-length like reading vlog just devoted to this one single book that basically documents my entire experience while reading this book. It should be out sometime this week, or if not this week, next week at the latest, because this book took me 3 weeks to read, guys. My biggest issue with this book was definitely the world building, just because it was so slow. It literally took me the entire first half of this book to finally understand what the heck was going on and for everything to come together. So that was my biggest issue. I mean, it was great world building because it's such a big book, but it was just really slow. My favorite part was just how great the female characters, they were just so strong, especially in comparison to the male characters, which is freaking hilarious, and I just really liked that portrayal. There's also a really great female-female relationship because it was just so good in terms of the slow burn in the beginning and the anticipation, and it was just done so well. My other favorite part though were definitely the dragons. I really liked how different they were in terms of the Eastern dragons versus the Western dragon, because now that I think about it, I never really thought about the difference, but there is a huge difference in terms of their looks, in terms of their elements, etc. And I'm really glad that the author really did a good job in portraying that as well. So overall, I give this book 4 stars just because there's a few elements to it, specifically the slowness of this book, just because there's 850 pages, and because how slow the beginning was, I felt like it could have been shorter, you know what I mean? Like, it didn't need to take 400 plus pages for you to finally have things come together. So there were definitely parts of it that I feel like had been shaven off, but I mean, It is an epic fantasy novel, and I guess because of the genre, it just needs to be a sheer size as well. Then the next book that I want to discuss is Descendant of the Crane by JOAN. I've actually mentioned this book a few times already in some of my videos, but it follows a young princess called Hasina whose father had recently passed away, but now she has evidence to prove that her father was actually murdered. She then enlists the help of a soothsayer as well as a convict to help with the investigation. And not only is she dealing with finding out the truth of her father's death, but she's also suddenly thrust into power because her father has passed away and now she's the queen of the kingdom. Not to mention there's also unrest within the kingdom as well as outside, so there's a bunch of skirmishes happening along the borders of her kingdom. So this book, you guys, was definitely my most disappointing read for March. I gave this book 2 stars. The only single part I liked about this book was the Asian culture and the references, because there were a lot of languages that was used in this book to portray certain things, and I was able to connect with it because I obviously understand the language. So that was the only single part of this book that I liked. So the author did a really good job of portraying ancient Chinese culture, but unfortunately there were so many elements of this book that I didn't like. For example, the writing, it was just so choppy. It would literally jump from one scene to the next without any warning, and suddenly you're just like, wait, what just happened? And I had to go back and reread many times just because I thought I missed something by accident. And the characters other than Hasina were very one-dimensional. They played their roles and that was it. I couldn't relate to any of them. And the ending was probably the most disappointing aspect of this book. Literally nothing felt concluded at the end. I mean, there was an epilogue that made me wonder if there was possibly a sequel, because if that's the case, then the ending is fine because it's kind of a build up for a sequel. But I think this is a standalone novel, so because of that, the ending is just the worst. So okay, this ending might not be the worst ever because Empress of All Seasons, that ending was literally the worst ever. Like, that was just so bad, which is why I gave a book 2 stars instead of 1 star like I did for that one. But because it's just so disappointing, I was very sad about it, guys. Like, the ending, I was just like, what happened? Like, is it really the end? Like, I just couldn't fathom that I had turned to the last page of this book. So overall, disappointing read. I mean, the cover is gorgeous. I had such high hopes for this too because everyone else who I read it seemed to really enjoy it, but unfortunately, it was not for me. Then the last book that I want to discuss is Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. This book follows 3 characters. The first one is a girl who can communicate with gods and can somehow use their magic. The second character is a prince who doesn't know who to trust. And the third character is a mysterious boy with a monstrous secret. And somehow, for whatever reason, their lives intertwine and now they band together to kill the king and to stop the war. This book was amazing. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I actually already discussed this book very briefly in my Spring's Read recommendations video, so I will link that above in case you want to check that out. My favorite part though was definitely the dynamic between all 3 of the characters. I really liked the gradual shift between the initial distrust, fear, to possibly trust to something even more. Another favorite aspect that I really liked was the slow burn romance, because there is one in this book and it was just so well done. I mean, I am loving this character as well. Like, he has some bad boy vibes and I am just all for that. And the magic system for this book is actually incredibly unique. On one hand, we have Nadia, who can communicate with gods and somehow has direct access to their magic. And then on the other hand, we have blood magic. And the difference between these 2 types of magic is what has caused these 2 countries to be at war for centuries. This is also the war that the 3 characters are trying to stop. What I did find interesting though was the fact that this book is only told in 2 POVs, even though there's 3 main characters. So in retrospect, I understand why, but at the same time, it would have been really fascinating for me to kind of understand this character, this third character as well. And the reason why I couldn't give this book 5 stars was because the beginning was actually a little bit confusing, especially with all the introduction of all these different gods and all the different types of magic, because honestly, there were literally types of gods for literally every single thing. And each god had a different type of magic. So that was really hard to kind of understand and kind of realize like who is who and fully grasp all of that. And I also didn't really like the fact that there was no third POV because he was such an important character as well. I mean, like I said, in retrospect, I get it, but it would have been nice to include his thoughts and his perspective as well. So overall, if you're looking for an amazing, gritty, dark novel, I definitely recommend this. I'm also really excited because this is a trilogy and I just cannot wait to dive right into the 2nd and 3rd book of the series. So these are the 6 books that I really want to mention in this video today. Let me know down below if you have read any of the books that I mentioned. If you agree with me, if you didn't agree with me, let me know why and why not. But as always, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe down below, don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!